would like to welcome all of you today to observe the birth anniversary of my father, the 80th birth anniversary, on the occasion of which we are organizing a memorial lecture. Ved ji, as he was popularly called, or Ved Bhasin Sahab, was a very special man. Special in many ways. For every daughter, her father is always very special. But that is not the only reason why he was special. He was special also because he left an imprint in many facets of my life. Everything that I did, everything that I do, everything that I am in my career, in my activism, in my own personal life, there is an imprint of my father. But along with that, he is special also for many people, many of you sitting here today, many lives that he touched directly or indirectly. He was special also to people who really didn't know him personally, because of his immense contribution in his field of journalism, for his crusade against communalism, for his fight for secular values, for socialism, and for his contribution in various other fields, whether it was art, it was consumer rights, in his student day politics, in his role, in his brief stint in itself. And that is what makes him so special. The tragedy of having a great man as a father is that you lose him. And the bigger tragedy is, for me, is that it was after he was gone, I could actually understand what he really meant. After he was gone, there were several people who, came and offered condolences, and I was struck and amazed by the scale of people who had so much respect for him. Not only people whom he worked with, who believed in his ideas. There were people who opposed him always, but they loved him at the same time, because he had the ability to befriend them even after having an argument. He could maintain that personal level of relationship which is so rare in most people. And even after a very bitter argument, there was no malice. And that ability endeared him to so many people. The other thing for which he earned immense respect was his commitment, his courage. Many people talk about how he remained unbent. He stood by his principles and he fought courageously without caring about the losses he endured. Some people would like to call it sacrifice, and I would say that is a way of looking at his life. He lived his life on his own terms and conditions. He lived life as he knew it, because he believed it, because he believed that this was the only way that we live as human beings. What is it? I look back and wonder, what is it that endeared him to so many people, or so many people were endeared to him? That's the basic principle of humanism, which became the core of his life. And from this humanism flow all his ideas, all his humanism itself becoming the fountainhead, all the work that on trying to bridge the divides between different regional, religious identities, acting as a bridge for social justice, his fight for social justice, his fight for socialistic values, his fight for marginalized communities, for the underdog, his upholding the principles, the best practices of journalism. When I was very young, I've said this before and I'd like to repeat it here to the audience in Kashmir. I was 6 years old when this idea of humanism came to me, and at that time I didn't understood it the way I understand it today. In school, I heard friends talking about, discussing which God they believed in. So everybody had a different God to believe in. I came back home and a little puzzled because from a family of atheists, we have no gods at home. So I asked my father who he believed in. And he just looked at me puzzled. And then I asked him, I kept asking questions, do you believe in Jesus? So he said, no. I said, Allah, and then Ramji, Shivji, so on and so forth. And he kept saying, no. So I said, then who do you believe in? So he said, I believe in you. And at that time I felt, I was raised to a kind of pedestal of reverence. It was much later that I understood what the import of those words, I believe in you. He meant he believed in human beings. He believed in people. He believed in himself.
Happens to be the birth anniversary of Mr. Ved Bhasin and also the death anniversary of Shameen Ahmad Shameen. These are the two persons whose life or whose association has left a deep imprint also upon my life as much if not more than what Anuradha just said. I don't want to take long time to enumerate in which way the imprint they left on my life, but I would like to point out 2-3 things that I have marked that were common to both. Both were men of commitment to ideals they believed in, and both were men of conviction, and above all, both had courage of conviction. And they were prepared to pay the price for that courage of conviction. All through life, they stood for certain ideals and stood by them. For that, they had to suffer. At times, suffer very, very acute hardships, materially, physically, and financially. But they never did. Another point as I noted was that when they taught their commitment, they also were great excellence in their profession. Shameen, both extremely great persons. Their knowledge was based on study, their knowledge was based on observations which were far, deep, and so was their commitment. These things are missing in today's public life. Whether it is excellence, then excellence taking a positive edge and getting transmitted down the line. Two things which in profession, he started a newspaper in Kashmir, and when Kashmir went into a very deep crisis, which is out of which it is struggling to come out in the 90s, it was he and he alone that I can say with conviction that he reflected the truth on the ground, even at the cost of his what was due to him otherwise. I mean, there were trouble from the official side, there were threats of life. At that time, running Kashmir Times was a problem in which, as I say, people came forward like Dr. Merajuddin, who is here. Many of the people who are here today, they are in different places of life. They came and they upheld this banner of Kashmir Times, which reflected two things. That basically tell the truth. What is happening in Kashmir? Today, truth is the biggest casualty, number one. Whether it is media, television. Number two, say it boldly and say it firmly. And while expressing views, you have to be honest. What's happening? They had Shamim and Ved Bhasin both had certain common ideas in which they believed. For instance, equality of men, justice, and human rights. On this, they would never compromise. Today, we find that there is lack of commitment. Now that they are being remembered, Vedji is being remembered, his books are, I mean, whatever they said, like Shamim's books are being produced, I am sure this will help a long way in promoting those values. I want to stand between you and the uh, speaker of the day, who I know personally. Thanks to Vedji, when he came here for a few years before his death, we had some interaction with him, and he has written books. He is no stranger to Kashmir. He is as well known as anybody, if not more. You like what he has to say, and as I said, there is going to be interaction, which certainly will be confined to the topic of the lecture. Thank you very much.
That people had before they came here in the to speak, and I would like to apologize that today
इंग्लिश सोसाइटी में भी डिबेटिंग सोसाइटी, उर्दू डिबेटिंग सोसाइटी का मैं सेक्रेटरी था, तो उस लिहाज से मेरा इंटरेस्ट ज़्यादा लिटरेचर में, एकेडमिक वर्ल्ड में ज़्यादा था। कोई फ्यूगल बैकग्राउंड थी, 1945 में बना और पॉलिटिक्स मेरी अपनी लोग मुझे बड़े अच्छे थे, तो जेल से भागे जेल से की खिदमत नहीं की है, बेटा जरूरत पड़ी तो खिदमत के लिए।
And now the moment we've been all waiting for. Professor Shumantro Bose does not need an introduction in Kashmir. He's not new to Kashmir. He's been coming here. He's worked on Kashmir. He's written several books. He's Professor of International and Comparative Politics at the London School of Economics. He specializes in the study of ethnic and national conflicts and their management, with a particular focus on the Indian subcontinent, especially Kashmir and former Yugoslavia, particularly Bosnia and Herzegovina. His publications include States, Nations, Sovereignty, Sri Lanka, India and Tamil Eelam Movement, Bosnia after Dayton, Nationalist Partition and International Intervention, Kashmir, The Roots of Conflict, Paths to Peace, and Contested Lands, Wars and Peace in Israel, Palestine, Kashmir, Bosnia, Cyprus, and Sri Lanka. His forthcoming book is End of Secularism, which is what he would be talking about today, looking at reflections from Turkey and India. Thank you so much.
To be given this opportunity to deliver this lecture in memory of Ved Bhasin, a person of that eminence and integrity. I knew Ved Bhasin for the last 2 decades of his life, from 1994 onwards, which is when I first started coming to Kashmir and also to Jammu, and a little later to Ladakh as well. As Sayyid Malik Saab, as Anuradha have said, Vedji is probably unique in the respect he commanded across the many divides in the state of Jammu and Kashmir, and on both sides of the line dividing the state of Jammu and Kashmir. I can't think of any other individual who can equal Ved Bhasin in that regard. This is my first visit to the state since Vedji passed away a year and a half ago. So I'm missing him because he was my constant companion on most of my journeys and travels in this state from the mid-1990s onwards. But it's nice to have the chance to remember him in this very special way. There's this commemorative volume that Kashmir Times has brought out, which was formally released today, and it contains, some of Vedji's writings, as well as many recollections by people who knew him for much longer than I did, although I was very fortunate to know him for the last 20 years or so of his life, from the time that he was already in his mid-60s. Many of you know this already, but I should say that my subsequent work on Kashmir and its conflict benefited enormously from Ved Bhasin's vast storehouse of knowledge, his nuanced insights into the conflict in all its dimensions, which he had gained from 6 or 7 decades of first-hand experience, both as a participant and then as a leading observer of events. In all of my own work on Kashmir, Ved Bhasin's imprint and influence is always evident. In the commemorative volume, there are a couple of anecdotes that make me smile. One anecdote pointed out that Ved Bhasin never let his extraordinary popularity go to his head. And I am an eyewitness to the extraordinary popularity and respect he commanded in his lifetime. In this very city, whether it's downtown or uptown or old town, I have personally seen not just the respect, the popularity, but one can say without any exaggeration, the adulation he commanded from ordinary citizens who simply loved his honesty and his integrity. And of course, he was a very charismatic speaker as well, as most of you are aware, whether in Hindustani or in English, and that certainly helped. Yet Vedji never let all that popular adulation, whether from elites or from ordinary people, go to his head. That's a rare quality. He always remained the same humble, grounded Ved Bhasin that we all knew and loved. There is another anecdote that made me smile. And that was, regarding, Ved Bhasin's, personal morality. He stood for morality in his own profession of journalism and in public life in general. Vedji never compromised with his values and principles, as we know. And perhaps, he removed himself from active politics after a while because the intrinsic immorality of politics conflicted with his personal sense of morality. Well, I think Jammu and Kashmir politics was the poorer for his position, although an individual's decision must be respected. Vedji did something else which is perhaps regrettable. He never systematically wrote an autobiography, his memoirs, which would be an extraordinarily valuable resource on the Kashmir conflict from the 1940s until the 2000s. But I, among others, and I'm sure his family more than me, I, among others, happen to be the repository of what might be called the Ved Bhasin oral history tradition. Because I learned about Kashmir literally at his feet, very often over drinks. There was never any formal instruction, mind you. It was always, very informal. Long conversations, sometimes late into the night, sometimes while traveling, sometimes with other people. And I gleaned a great deal from all those conversations, that extraordinarily valuable informal instruction. Vedji held secularism as one of his core values, something very dear to his heart. And that's why I chose the topic of secularism as the topic of this Ved Bhasin Memorial Lecture. The title I gave Anuradha and Prabodh is, as you can see, The End of the Secular State, ? Reflections on India and Turkey. One of many things I learned from Ved Bhasin, I didn't just learn about the Kashmir conflict from him, I learned, I hope, some values as well, is that, and that's in one of the recollections in that commemorative volume, is that he never used harsh words. And this is quite extraordinary because, as we all know, Vedji was a man of very strong opinions and convictions. Anuradha talked a bit about this. Yet, he never personalized things. That one can actually have and express strong opinions and convictions without being harsh and offensive. And that model of civility which Ved Bhasin embodied is perhaps nearly missing both in the field of journalism today as well as in the broader public sphere of civility, of dignity, of gentlemanliness. Vedji has passed on, but his spirit lives. He's a very rare person because, we are all mortal, we'll all die one day, sooner or later. But Vedji is one of those rare people who's left behind a legacy. And the legacy is, well, first of all, there is an institutional legacy in the form of the Kashmir Times Group, which is now being ably handled by his daughters, his son-in-law, and perhaps in the future, in coming years, by his granddaughter as well. But what that institutional legacy really embodies is a moral legacy, all that Ved Bhasin stood for. And secularism was one of the core values of that moral legacy, which I hope is our inheritance from Ved Bhasin's life and work. So he remains immortal in spirit, although he has passed on in the physical sense. As established to recurrent coups and with a weakly institutionalized and functioning democratic framework. In fact, this description is actually, it sounds like a description of Pakistan, but it's a good description of Turkey as well. Compared to that, secularism in India, whatever its flaws, was partnered with a broadly democratic ethos, a broadly democratic regime and state, and more generally in India, democratic traditions, democratic institutions, and democratic political culture is much more strongly rooted in comparison to Turkey, which means that anti-secular forces have a more difficult time taking over the secular state in the manner that has happened in Turkey in the 21st century. The actual process of replacement will take place over the next 2 or so years. That replaced, though India argue, it is not that Indian secularism is a Western import or some kind of European concept. First of all, it is one aspect of India's traditions, of the subcontinent's traditions, I should say. An ethic of coexistence, of mutual respect and coexistence of different religious faiths. It's ingrained in our subcontinental history. It's one aspect of our traditions. It's not been imported from Europe or anywhere else. And secondly, secularism was a central ideal of the movement led by the Indian National Congress, at least by most of the apex leadership of the Indian National Congress. Of course, there were many different variants of the secularism that the Congress espoused, even at the level of the apex leadership. There was Gandhi, who, as we know, joined the Khilafat movement in 1920, 1921. Then what came to prevail from the 1950s onwards is broadly the Nehruvian concept of secularism. There was a third concept, I must say, of secularism, which didn't find expression in the independent Indian state, but I'd like to talk about it, just a little bit. When Subhash Chandra Bose was in Germany in 1942, he was trying to raise an armed force, and in fact he had raised an armed force, from Indian POWs who had been captured by the Germans in North Africa, in the battles in North Africa between Rommel's forces and the British. And they had been constituted in Germany into something called the Indian Legion. It was about 4,000 strong. So sometime in 1942, Mr. Bose is in Berlin, and he visits the camp of the Indian Legion, which is in a town called Königsbruck in Prussia, not far from Berlin. Now, in the Indian Legion, even the smallest units were mixed. Unlike the British Indian Army, which practiced these differences systematically, including a distinction between so-called martial and non-martial groups. In the Indian Legion, all units were mixed. Separate religious kitchens for the soldiers had been abolished. Separate caste kitchens had been abolished as well. So just prior to Mr. Bose's visit to the Indian Legion camp in 1942, the soldiers who were Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, even a few Christians, I think, they decided to take this unity one step forward, one step further. And to greet him, they composed a hymn or a song, which was a syncretistic song comprising different religious traditions. The person who has written about this was one of Mr. Bose's close associates of the time, a man called Ved Bhasin, who in 1943 accompanied him on his 93-day submarine journey from Germany to Southeast Asia in 1943. Ved Bhasin, I knew him too as a child. I remember him quite well. He was from Hyderabad, South Hyderabad, South India, Hyderabad, Telangana, Hyderabad. And Ved Bhasin, said that these unlettered men from villages in different parts of India, Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, even a few Christians, they composed a hymn combining their traditions of Kabirian simplicity, meaning Sant Kabir, of course. And they lined up and sang it aloud to the leader when he visited. The leader didn't say anything and went away, went back to Berlin, but everyone assumed that he was happy, and the fact that he didn't say anything was not considered surprising, because as Ved Bhasin writes, he rarely expressed his feelings in public. But after the return to Berlin, Ved Bhasin was called into Mr. Bose's office and given a dressing down, and was asked who pulled this stunt, who thought this stunt up. Was it you or somebody else? And then he said, look, Abid, I know that your intentions are very honorable, but today you are trying to use religion to unite people. Tomorrow, someone whose politics is different and who is mischievous will use the same religious sentiments to divide people. Please don't bring, all these religious sentiments into the national movement. The national movement must be above, these religious affiliations and boundaries. So that is a more radical vision of secularism that never found expression in independent India. A year later, in 1943, Mr. Bose was in Singapore, and there's another very interesting anecdote. He was invited to the Chettiar community's temple in Singapore. Now, there was a vested interest on both sides. The Chettiars, a very wealthy, community, prominent, community in Southeast Asia of Indian origin, they were very keen to host him because he was being serenaded everywhere he went. And of course, the Chettiars being very wealthy, the movement and the Indian National Army needed funds, and they were a potential rich source of funding for the movement. However, the invitation to Mr. Bose came with a rider attached, a condition. And it said that, non-Hindus are not allowed in the Chettiar temple. Now, Mr. Bose refused the invitation. And he said that, well, for starters, a lot of the officers of the Indian National Army are Muslims, because the 14th Punjab Regiment had surrendered in Singapore, and many of its officers, people like Shah Nawaz Khan Janjua, who was from Rawalpindi, Muhammad Zaman Kiani, Colonel Habibur Rahman, who was actually from the Jammu region originally, south of here, they are all Muslims. And, I cannot go to a place where, only Hindus are allowed. And he made his displeasure very clear. And the Chettiars, backtracked, and they resent the invitation with no conditions attached. But, and it was very funny, because when they went, accompanied by the Muslim officers and all the other non-Hindu officers, including Anglo-Indian Christians and so on, and Sikhs, of course, and all caste groups, the priests of the Chettiar temple put red tilaks on the forehead of the Muslim officers. Ved Bhasin has recounted this, he was there as well. But Mr. Bose made it clear that that this was not about Muslims or non-Muslims, or Hindus or non-Hindus. He said that, I cannot go to a place where some of my people are welcome and some are not welcome. I just cannot do that. And if somebody said that you can come, but you can't bring non-Muslims with you, my reaction would be exactly the same. I will turn down the invitation with the contempt it deserves. Okay, so those are the variants of Indian secularism. Note that this Bose view that he practiced of secularism is the polar opposite of Jinnah Sahib's view, because Jinnah Sahib fused religion, nation, and state in his politics, but it's also very different from the Gandhian concept of secularism. Gandhi joined the Khilafat movement to take the national movement forward, to build Hindu-Muslim unity, and the Khilafat movement was left without a cause when Ataturk, who was still not Ataturk then, he was just Mustafa Kemal, the Ghazi, or the commander of the victorious Turkish War of Independence. When Ghazi Mustafa Kemal abolished summarily the caliphate in 1924, the Ali brothers, who were the principal leaders of the Khilafat movement, had a couple of years before that bestowed a title on Mustafa Kemal, Saiful Islam. And in 1924, they denounced him bitterly as a traitor to Islam. All right, so much for the different variants of secularism. The key criterion on which the Indian and Turkish secular state stands or falls is whether it is able to live up to that very demanding requirement, tall order, of strictly equal treatment of all groups and communities of citizens, regardless of their religious identity. Well, in both India and Turkey, the secular state has foundered on that very demanding criterion, I have to say. Let me give a couple of examples, because I don't have a lot of time. Let me talk about the cow slaughter issue, since it's re-emerged with such a vengeance in recent months, especially. There is a directive principle in the Indian Constitution, but it doesn't advocate preservation, it advocates preservation of cattle on scientific grounds, right? Not on religious grounds. Ambedkar and Nehru managed to stave off attempts to insert a kind of cow protection clause, even as a directive principle in the Indian Constitution, citing religious grounds. If you look at it, it sounds scientific, that's Ambedkar at work. Of course, this did not satisfy a lot of people, including many leaders within the Congress. And very soon after the Republic was formed, the cow slaughter and movement re-emerged with a vengeance. This was not enough for them. Now, in the mid-50s, starting with Uttar Pradesh, the former United Provinces, and to the late 1950s, cow slaughter laws on religious grounds, not technical or scientific grounds, as stated in that directive principle of the Indian Constitution, were adopted one after the other in Uttar Pradesh, the first state to do so, then in Bihar, Rajasthan, and Madhya Pradesh, which at that time was still known as the Central Provinces and Berar. Now, of course, this violates the secular state's principle, essential principle of neutrality between members of different religions. There were Muslims, so in a wide swathe, most of northern India, cow slaughter became illegal by state laws on religious grounds. This is, of course, imposing the taboos of some of the followers of one religion on the rest of society. It's nothing more and nothing less. There were legal challenges to these cow slaughter bans, which went all the way up to the Indian Supreme Court, which is such an active institution, as we all know. It was active even back then. And the Supreme Court rejected the plaintiffs' complaints made by Muslims. The complaints had cited both religious freedom as well as livelihood issues. Okay? And the Supreme Court used rather contorted and convoluted reasoning and kind of language to reject these challenges to the cow slaughter bans on religious grounds that had been enacted across northern India. This is 1950s, the formative period of the Indian secular state. Around the same time, as we all know, the Indian secular state undertakes a very ambitious and far-reaching reform and codification of Hindu personal and family laws. This is done, 4 acts are passed, codifying in a very reformed version Hindu family and personal laws in 1955 and 1956. And of course, ever since then, that has been a lightning rod as well for the anti-secular critique of the Indian secular state, that it reformed and codified the personal and family laws governing Hindus, but left all of the other religions, including Islam, strictly alone. And we all know what a live issue it is even today. Strictly speaking, although the critique is of course politically motivated, the anti-secularists have a point. You cannot single out members of one religion for your reforming zeal while leaving members of other religions to their devices, to live in peace, just as they please. So that's another example of the secular state in practice, the really existing, secular state, as opposed to the ideal of a secular state, which is strictly neutral, even in the rather wishy-washy Nehruvian concept. There's another danger about the secular state paying so much attention to Hindu laws. It gives the impression, whether deliberately or not, that the state is about Hindus. It cares more about Hindus. It gives priority and precedence to a Hindu reformist agenda, while leaving other groups out of its frame. That is an inadvertent, perhaps, consequence of this lopsided approach. What about Turkey? Well, on paper at least, a strictly secular state. But in fact, from the 1950s onwards, a certain kind of Hanefi Sunni majoritarianism reappears in Turkish society. Once die-hard secularists are no longer in charge of the state, starting in 1950, and there is a great revival of public religiosity, both of orthodox forms of Islamic worship and observance, and also folk Islam, which is extraordinarily popular, like Kashmir, in Anatolian society. Just as you have, Sheikh Nurani, Turkey has, although his appeal goes beyond Turkey, it has Mevlana Rumi, the famous 13th century Sufi saint and mystic. And along with the banning of the caliphate, of the closing down of the autonomous clergy, folk Islam had also been prohibited. So Rumi's mausoleum in the city of Konya had been in the city of disrepair until the mid-1950s, until this revival of public religiosity in its diverse forms took place. Well, by the 1970s, this has proceeded to the point where the Diyanet, a few of you may have heard of the Diyanet. The Diyanet literally means the Directorate, or the Directorate of Religious, Directorate General of Religious Affairs. When the Caliphate was established, and the autonomous clergy were kind of disbanded as well, the ulama, all religious institutions, that's the mosques, that's the imams, the khatibs, and all of that religious paraphernalia and personnel were brought under the control of the central state. And this is what is known as the control model of Turkish state secularism, that they survive, but only under the subordination, as a subordinate status, control of the secular state, run by ardent Kemalists. So basically, the key institution in all of this was the Diyanet, the Directorate General of Religious Affairs. This is a institution that was back then, it was established in 1924, the same day that the Caliphate was established, was abolished. This institution called the Diyanet has vast powers over the religious domain in Turkey, under the supervision and ultimate control of the authorities of the secular state. So it was intended to subordinate and control the religious sphere, religious personnel and religious institutions. But about 50 years into the Turkish Republic, by the 1970s, with political changes and social changes as well happening, the Diyanet has turned into an instrument of control of the secular state over religious affairs and institutions. It's turned into a mechanism for the propagation of religion. And in the Hanefi Sunni variant of the majority of the population of Turkey. So, for example, the Alevis, this very heterodox, Shiite sect, who number about 15 to 20% of Turkey's population. So, if it's 20%, it's about 16 million or 15 million of Turkey's 80 million plus people. The Alevis strongly supported the Kemalist secular state, quite understandably, because they had suffered repression and persecution for centuries under the Ottoman Empire, which of course was a Sunni Islamic empire. So they welcomed the Kemalist secular state, but over the decades, and supported it strongly, but over the decades, they were very disappointed that it did not really give them substantive equality, treatment, and recognition, but rather that the Turkish secular state over time became a Hanefi Sunni majoritarian state in all but name. Of course, the other problem was that because Turkey never transitioned to a democracy in the robust sense of the term, these differences over secularism, different approaches to secularism, the conflict between the secularist and anti-secularist perspectives could never be negotiated and in a democratic atmosphere, in a democratic framework of pluralism. Instead, it became a dogma of the state, even while in practice it gradually unraveled. Now, in the 1980s, that's a very, very crucial decade for understanding the unraveling of the secular state in both India and Turkey. In the 1980s, after Turkey's third military coup in 20 years, which took place in 1980, the military hierarchy, which is taking control of the state, is looking for some kind of a uniting ideology because it senses that the society 2014 as a single-party government in the Lok Sabha at least. What were the parallel developments in the 1980s in India? Very interesting developments. We have the well-known complicity of the Rajiv Gandhi government and it's the Congress's government in Uttar Pradesh in the opening up of the Babri Masjid complex in Ayodhya to the VHP. This happened in the early part of 1986, and it was soon followed within 2 months by the legislative intervention initiated and carried out by the Rajiv Gandhi government. It had a brute majority in the Lok Sabha, more than 400 members in the Lok Sabha, so no problem passing whatever legislation it likes. The legislative intervention to effectively render null and void the Supreme Court judgment in the Shah Bano case. This is an attempt, which might be called, this policy reduced Indian state secularism to the reciprocal, competitive appeasement of certain tendencies raised in the name of both Hindus and Muslims as non-negotiable demands. And it carried on after that. In 1989, just before the watershed 9th Lok Sabha election of November 1989, which signaled the end of the Congress's long era of hegemony in Indian politics, never to be regained in that form. Rajiv Gandhi kicks off his Lok Sabha campaign in November 1989 in Ayodhya, where he gives a call quite openly. He says that re-elect me and I will establish Ram Rajya in this country. Just prior to that, through the Uttar Pradesh government, which is the last Congress government of Uttar Pradesh, of course, permission had been granted to the VHP, the leaders of that agitation at that time. This is before the Vice stepped to the forefront with his Rath Yatra. Thank you.
When you are trying to comparatively analyze India,
Whether secularism should be reformed.
I found your optimism of previous secular credentials decline secularism in India. Exactly, not on academic academic.
With touching the forehead with the ground, when it rains.
May I say something?
Could not aspire to be considered serious.
Grand like a king, but yet so humble, so truthful and brave. Many people love him, but I love him the most. I am thankful to everyone present here today to remember Nanu. I hope all of you enjoyed being here and listened to our speaker with interest. Thank you for accepting our invitation and joining us on Nanu's birth anniversary. I would especially like to thank Mr. Professor Shumantru Bose. I would again like to thank the August and support and by those who could not attend the function today. Thank you.